At the beginning of last month, we got a Faye channel going over all the stuff around Book 9. You know, the standard introduction to the story, freebie unit that we usually get, banner stuff, all the usual stuff, basically. But unlike most other Faye channels that debut a new book, we didn't get a new game mode introduction this time. Before that, we had auto affinity battles, summoner duels before that, and so on and so forth. So it was really weird when we didn't get any news on a potential game mode, but that got me thinking about all the game modes that we do have and how there's really an underlying problem with it all that I will go over after today's sponsor. This video has been sponsored. Thanks to Tokyo Treat for sponsoring today's video. Hi guys, Z here. Do y'all ever get tired of the boring, mundane snacks that you have lying around your house? Do you want something new to spice up your life? How about something from Japan? Whoa, you could do that? You could get stuff from Japan? That's crazy. Why, yes, you can, thanks to Tokyo Treat and Sakura Box. Actually, I don't really like to have snacks around my place, but maybe you would if you had access to good snacks. Like from these companies, Tokyo Treat and Sakura Box offer monthly services that have fun and exclusive stuff all shoved into one convenient Japanese snack box. This can range from candies to chips and whatever else may be classified as a snack. I only know those two, because those are the only two I tend to eat. If it's something of that kind, it probably exists in either of these services. And don't fret about the language barriers, because each box comes with a pamphlet, look, pamphlet, describing all of the treats put into each monthly box. You could always make it a guessing game if you don't really want to read it though, but if you want to know what you're putting into your body, then this will help you. They pack a lot of goodies in each box every month, so you won't necessarily be starved for options, and every single month they always come out with new types of goodies to put in, so it's not always going to be the same thing every single time. Because of this, there's bound to be something in there that you'll like, or maybe somebody in your family will like, or maybe your dog will like it if they can eat it. But I bet they can, because these boxes only contain the finest of snacks. Unless it's chocolate, because they still can't eat that. Not sold on it yet? Here's some testimony from real legit people that are in fact real and legit. This product is awesome and from Japan, which makes it awesome.
Hey, I was told I would get paid if I said it was good. I love product. Sure do. Yum, yum, yum.
Oh, you want to know my thoughts on it? Of course you do. I like the boxes because it means I don't have to go a significant amount of time without eating, especially when I'm too lazy to make a meal. But also the variety is pretty cool. Okay, so they sent another box for the month of January, and this one's actually pretty cool, all things considered, since they always decorate the boxes. I kind of like the design on this one. They also come with a bunch of new snacks, as you would probably expect from these types of services, and I do kind of like it because there's always just going to be something new in it. Like, whatever's in the booklet. Yeah, you see, there's a booklet, and that's what you use to determine what's in the package. So yeah, let me tell you what I got. Okay, so there's a bunch of stuff in here that's pretty cool, and I did not get through everything yet because I do not know how I'm going to get through everything, but I did try a couple of the things. I did like the butter chips. I think those were really good. They had butter in them and chips in them, and yeah, those were pretty good. I also tried some of the strawberry gummies over here. I thought they were kind of nice. The Daruma peach gummies and stuff, yeah, those were, I thought those were pretty good too. I am looking to try and get to some of the other ones eventually, but I'm also not that big of a sweets guy, but still, no, there's a lot of cool stuff in here. Why not give it a shot by using the link in the description and get started today? It can make for a nice festive gift or something for the upcoming holidays, assuming it's still the holidays, but every day is a holiday with Tokyo Treat and Sakura Box. Use code ZShadow or the link below at Tokyo Treat or Sakura Box to receive $5 off your first order. You'll probably enjoy it. Thanks again to Tokyo Treat for sponsoring today's video. Are we back? Okay, cool. So as I was saying, with the lack of a new game mode and them really just taking the time to update Aether Raids a bit more, it made me realize that of the recurring content in Heroes, most of it is focused on PvP. More specifically, Aether Raids and Summoner Duels taking up a good majority of the notable content that's in Faye. And granted, I like both of the modes, even with some issues that may crop up for both of them every so often, but there really isn't much of an alternative to go and play if you wanted to do something else. There's the story mode that gets something new each month, but it's also hard to care about it at times when IS doesn't really want to put in the effort they could be putting into it. Some of the recurring content is also a lot of auto battling for the most part, whether that's Tempest Trials, Forging Bonds, or Hero's Journey, although the last two at least have a nice little bit of quirks about them. And if not for any of that stuff, it's usually just filler modes that for the most part aren't really that fun or even good to begin with, and that's because of IS not really caring about it one way or another. That would be stuff such as auto affinity battles, where you you just sit and watch a 1-minute unskippable battle of your units potentially doing something. Pawns of Loki, which is pretty frustrating to play at times because of how the balancing is around newer units. Lost Lore, which is literally just press 2 buttons and do nothing. Frontline Phalanx, which is press 2 buttons and then you get something, and so on and so forth. I do at least want to give them some credit because Seer Snare is a genuinely amazing game mode, but it only runs every 2 to 4 months, which makes it barely existent anyway, as well as limited hero battles, but it's the most inaccessible mode that we have in the game, especially to newer players, because it requires having a diverse enough barracks to even attempt beating some of them. Suffice to say, modes that we do get for PvE have issues in frequency, accessibility, or just aren't really modes in many cases and just mostly serve as filler, and it really sucks because while I do think the PvP modes are fairly decent, I don't think they're appealing to many of the people that just want to have a more casual experience. And this is especially more prevalent in my opinion when it's around Fire Emblem of all things, which I think carries this issue more than arguably most other gacha games out there. At least the way I see it, Fire Emblem Heroes isn't really the same type of gacha compared to many others that exist, but that's only because Fire Emblem as a series has had a long history of over a dozen entries, including many people that have played a mainline Fire Emblem game looking to try Heroes when only part of Heroes really retains much of what you'd find in a mainline entry. I think if Heroes were a brand new IP and started as a gacha, then this most likely wouldn't have been as notable of a focal point as it is in my opinion. However, Fire Emblem as a series has historically been primarily PvE that's appealed to basically all types of players, casual, hardcore, in the middle, whatever the case might be. And I think many people who are coming from mainline to Heroes expect a decent quantity of what they're more familiar with, or at least would like to play around with some of their favorites from across the series, but lack many of the means to do so. At least if you want to exclude Fate's PvP system, but that's a whole different discussion of its own. Otherwise, it's basically just PvE. And don't get it twisted, I like Fire Emblem Heroes a lot, partly because of how different it is at times, especially going as far to experiment with all sorts of stuff, and there's a lot of appeal to that. But there's definitely a massive barrier of entry when it comes to Heroes, even ignoring the fact that a lot of the stuff is so hard to digest with newer units and UI bloat and complexity creep that would make players that have stuck around for a long time have issues with everything as well. It's just a large hurdle for many. And I think if Fire Emblem Heroes had as much PvE content as it does PvP content, I think it would not only help balance out potential alternatives to PvP, but it could also curb a lot of the power creep issues, which may sound stupid, but let's talk about that for a second. Intelligent systems can continue to release all these insane units and skills that will be extremely prevalent in something like Aether Raids and Summoner Duels, but would any of that matter if there was an alternative mode for you to play at a more casual level? Look at Seer Snare as a great example. You don't need all the latest and greatest stuff to beat the mode whatsoever. In fact, you could probably waltz in with some of the worst units in the entire game and beat it. And because you don't need any of the latest and greatest things, what difference is power creep to you at the end of the day? Even if the difficulty is a problem in some cases, such as it being too easy, they can easily make higher difficulties to compensate for summer players looking for a challenge. They did this before with United Warfront, so it's very much in their capabilities. The power creep part is also a lot of the reason why even going into PvP modes isn't that feasible for many, and it just means less content for them, which does matter a bit even when extending into playing around with some units. Heroic rails are required to access certain types of units and weapons, but they're also locked behind Aether Raids for the most part, and granted, you could just auto-battle 3 of them, but the build-up is also so slow comparatively to playing at a higher level that it takes even longer as a result. We will get them as login bonuses and quests from time to time at least, but a good majority still comes from Aether Raids. And on the topic of quests, at least it's something more to do in the game, albeit with minimal variety. But that said, I don't think loading up on even more of them is the approach when most of the gameplay loop around them much of the time just kind of exists, and depending on the type of quest, it could just be there to waste your time, like with the training tower quests, which I don't think most people like, if any at all. Sometimes they can be fun though, because they make you experiment around with different team types, but that's really about it. One thing I at least want to bring up is how low stakes of a gacha Fae is already, which for many, including myself at times, makes it accessible and appealing because you don't need to spend so much time doing everything. Of course, that does exclude stuff like Summoner Duels, but that's also very outlined in what it expects for most players to do. If you want to do any sort of dailies, it takes maybe 5 minutes at most on average, excluding any other potential events at the time. And because of this, maybe it's already fine enough as is to many players, since they could go in, do a couple arena matches, maybe a free Summoner 3, an Abyssal here or there, and then do the occasional story content. Do casuals really care if there's any more to do beyond that? It's not really a whole lot of content, but it's also timely and manageable to most, and that's why some people do play it. But even if there was a recurring mode that ran every week or even once every 2 weeks and it was on the same level of PvE as something like Seer Snare, wouldn't that be more fulfilling or something more worthwhile in general than the current standard? Because if you're not playing Aether Raids or Summoner Duels, what really is there beyond the aforementioned? And for all I know, many may not even care at the end of the day, and if they don't, then why should I care? And again, maybe keeping it as low stakes as possible is potentially more appealing to some, but I can definitely say that it's not very encouraging at times to just use favorites when they don't really work in many facets of the game. Although at least to me, if we had more PvE content for people to play with, and not poorly made or lazily put together like auto affinity battles, I think there'd be so much more appeal to the game in general. Even if they don't want to make a new weekly mode that has at least a similar amount of length to that of Aether Raids, why not have 4 modes total that ran each month? If we had something like Seer Snare as a monthly mode alongside Hall of Forums, Hero's Journey, and maybe 2 to 3 other modes to fill the weekly gap, I think many of the complaints wouldn't really exist to begin with. And I think that's something they should look into doing because a lot of the base doesn't really care for the high-end competitive modes whatsoever. Many even outright hate modes like Summoner Duels. And as it currently stands, the base content for Heroes isn't that great beyond what you may get out of PvP, which is why I think there should be more of an incentive to have recurring monthly modes. We do have a fair bit of recurring modes and game modes in general, but I also think they should be scrapped in favor of newer, more fleshed out ones instead of the ones that aren't really that fun for anyone. What those modes could be, while I don't really have any specific ideas, I would like them to experiment more with the types of gameplay because a lot of the ones that we do have are very auto battle coded. Seer Snare does a great job at experimenting with the base gameplay because it's effectively a roguelike and changes around stuff like the weapon triangle so that you can't blindly defeat everything with no issues, especially since what your units end up with is entirely based on RNG, but not to a degree where it's impossible to beat the game. Maybe they could try experimenting with other genres, and for what it's worth, they did do that with Tap Battle, which is essentially a rhythm game. It was fun and changed up the status quo over what was effectively pressing 2 buttons and getting a reward, but it doesn't run anymore despite working surprisingly well with how varied Fire Emblem's libraries of OST are. I do think the mode can't wear down on its charm if ran that frequently though, which might make the process of designing some modes a lot more difficult, and it's still a notable ask regardless. However, I think it would end up being more of a net positive in the grander scheme of Faye down the line, but maybe it's not worth it to them in the end, so who could really say? That said, I want to know what you think in the comments below, because with the 8th anniversary of Heroes coming around next month, it would be really nice to see them switch things up a bit more for the following year. I don't necessarily know if it would work in a way to bring in newer players, but maybe it will help keep the current ones they do have. That, or they release 3 houses too and the game goes on for another 50 years, but that's for another time.